We are on Daf Kuf Vav Amud Aleph. The fifth line in the Gemara. We're talking about Havdalah and the need to have somebody comes home and he only has one cup of wine. He's going to have Havdalah and the benching cup all at once. And the Gemara learned from there several halachas, 7 or 8 halachas, including that he couldn't have made Havdalah and had a sip from the cup and then continued having his meal and then bench on that same cup, because ta'amoy pagmoy. Once he tasted the wine, even if he just took a sip of the wine, pagmoy, he made it invalid. Now there's an invalidation on account of the actual drinking from it, which makes it, in a sense, disgusting that somebody else had drank from this, and so you wouldn't want to make a bracha, a kiddush, or benching bracha on a cup of wine that somebody else already sipped from. Or we also saw that ta'amai pagmai, where they would come together on account of that it diminishes the amount of wine that he has there. In any case, so we're going to get into a little bit of this idea of ta'amai pagmai, that you can invalidate something from having sipped from it, that it will no longer be valid for bracha, for a cup of wine for bracha. The Gemara says, Rabbi Yaakov bar Idi kaped achatzva pegima. Rabbi Yaakov bar Idi would be careful that even a full barrel, a huge barrel of wine that somebody had taken some out of, sipped out of, to invalidate the whole thing for Kiddush. Whereas not everybody would be that strict, because maybe an entire barrel, even though that it's disgusting, but there's so much there that it will sort of be diluted and lost in there. But Rabbi Yaakov, Rav Idi bar Shisha, kaped akasa pegima. He was only careful if that very cup someone had sipped from, when that would invalidate it. Amar bar Ravashi, the teacher who was the son of Ravashi, kaped afila chavisa pegimta. On a smaller barrel, he would be careful, say if somebody sipped from it, it's going to be invalid. And this invalidates it on account of that somebody sipped from it, so it's disgusting. Would you gift this to your to a prince or to your local minister? You wouldn't. So definitely you shouldn't use this as a bracha. Whether if you don't have another choice whether you can use it or not, Rashbam says that you could b'diavad use it. Tosfos questions that. In any case, but the idea is that they were careful not only on a cup, but also on barrels, even on a large barrel. And the Gemara now comes into Kiddush, which we've mentioned multiple times, and the obligation of remembering Shabbos is a Torah obligation. And the question is, where does this remembering it on wine come from? So the Gemara says, Tana Rabban in the Brisa told, Zachor es yom HaShabbos l'kadesho. Remember the day of Shabbos to sanctify it, to make it holy. So there's a remembrance of the Yom HaShabbos. Technically, I could just say, it's Shabbos, it's holy, and that would be sufficient. But the Brisa says, Zachreu al hayayim. Remember it on the wine. And as we mentioned in some of the previous shurim, there's a concept of in Shira al Yayin, that Shira, song, when we say praise, we're going to do so on a cup of wine. And that's a general rule, not just for Shabbos. We know that on the Rechuppah we do it on a glass of wine, on a bris we do it on a glass of wine. There many mitzvahs we do at the Seder, there are 4 cups of wine. Many mitzvahs we do so on a cup of wine. That is a show of Shira, of song, of praise that we're going to do on wine. Here it seems specific to Shabbos. And Tosfos points out that there are multiple pesukim in the Torah or in Tanakh that use wine as a form of remembrance. And so that would be the basis that when the Torah says Zacharis Yom HaShabbos L'Kachon, to do so in a cup of wine. But as Tosfos points out, and I think that's the halacha, that the concept of wine for Zechira is D'Rabbanan. The mitzvah of remembering Shabbos is a Torah obligation, and the Chachamim added to that and said, we see in the Torah the concept of remembrance on a cup of wine, and so the mitzvah that the Torah obligation of remembering Shabbos to sanctify it, we do so on a cup of wine, and that's the kiddush we do. Ainli elabayim b'layla minayim. That's only by day. How do you know so by night? So it says, remember the Shabbos, the day of Shabbos to sanctify it. So Gemara says, what are you talking about? Balayla minayin? Your first question is, how do I know I have to do it by night? Adarabba, to the contrary. Ikar kiddusha balayla. The main point of sanctifying Shabbos is at night, because that's when Shabbos comes in. When you have to sanctify it, at its inaugural moment, at the time that you're transitioning from a non-Shabbos into Shabbos, that's when you have to remember to sanctify it, to make it holy by declaring it a Yom Kaddish, a holy day. But once you've already been in the Shabbos for 10 hours, to then sanctify it, that doesn't sound right. So the first point of the Brisa doesn't seem correct. Additionally, Vasu. So Iker Kedusha Balaylahu Kaddish. The main sanctification is at night. Because that's what you need to do. You need to sanctify the inaugural moment, the beginning of the day. Vasu, and additionally, the Laila Minayin, even if the text is correct. So you say, how do we know that you also have to do it at night? The Kasha says, because it says, remember the day of Shabbos. So you haven't answered the question. So the Gemara says the text is incorrect, and it's supposed to read the other way. Right? Tana mahader alayla b'kanasav lei karadi mama, because otherwise the teacher is seeking a source for kiddush at night, and then he's bringing a verse that tells us that you need kiddush by day. So hachikama, so rather the Brisa's text, or even if you're not going to change the text, the meaning of the Brisa for sure is this. Remember the day of Shabbos to sanctify it. Now, it could have just said, remember Shabbos to sanctify it. Why did it say the day of Shabbos? So the first part is, since it says the first word, zachor, remember, and as we mentioned, that remembrance is to be done on wine. Biknisase. And when? At the moment of Shabbos coming in. That at the moment of of a transition from weekday to Shabbos, at the moment that sanctity begins, sanctify it. Remember to state, to remember to make it kadosh. But that only tells me that in the evening, at the onset of Shabbos, you have to say kiddush. B'yominaim, how do we know that you're also going to say kiddush by day? Yom HaShabbos, and that's why we have the teaching where the Torah says, remember the day of Shabbos. That word, the day, which is superfluous, is to tell us that Zachrei Alayayin also to make Kiddush by day. So now the Gemara says, okay, great. So we know for Kiddush at night, and we're going to say the Kiddush of the sanctification of Shabbos. What's the Kiddush text for by day? Mai Mavarech. B'yom Mai Mavarech, what bracha do you say? Amar Rav Yehuda Borei Pri Agafen. Rav Yehuda says you just say the bracha on wine, Borei Pri Agafen. The very fact that you're having wine in honor of Shabbos is its sanctification. That you're having a special meal in honor of Shabbos is the sanctification. So all you have to do is say the bracha Borei Pri Agafen. And you may be familiar that in the Siddur and customarily people say verses before Kiddush, but that's not really a part of Kiddush. It's just that the Kiddush Borei Pri Agafen is going to seem pretty pale, pretty simple. And so people have traditionally said some verses that refer to Shabbos. But ultimately, the Kiddush for Shabbos day is just the bracha Borei Pri Agafen. That bracha on wine. And the very fact that somebody is having wine and saying a bracha on wine is in and of itself the sanctification of Shabbos, showing the glory and the blessing of having something special for Shabbos. Rav Ashi Ikla Mechuzah. So the Gemara tells a story of Rav Ashi who came to Mechuzah, and he obviously had the custom of doing Kiddush Shabbos day as usual, and which is to say the bracha b'Reb Yagafen and that fulfills the Kiddush. Amrule likdish lan mar Kiddush Rabbah. But as a guest, they told him, why don't you lead the great Kiddush for us? Now he was confused. The great Kiddush? The great Kiddush is something that you would do Friday night. Shabbos day is just Bar Priagafen. So he wasn't sure did they mean what they meant. Now, in general, there is a concept that you will find throughout the Gemara that they use something called Lashon Sagi Nahar, like the term Sagi Nahar. Now, there was a river in Babylon, in Bavel, called the Sagi River, Sagi Nahar. A play on those words, Sagi also means plenty or enough, and Nahora means light. So Sagi Nahar, besides for being the name of a river, also could mean someone with plenty of light. Sagi Nahora, plenty of light. So people in the Gemara, the Gemara would reference people that were blind as people that were Sagi Nahar. They had plenty of light. It's a euphemism to kindly say that they don't have, they couldn't see, but they have plenty of light. So this, anytime the Gemara uses something that seems praiseworthy, where really there's a note of a lack, is called Lashon Sagi Nahar. It's in the same vein, in the same term as Sagi Nahar. So he wasn't sure, is this Lashon Sagi Nahar? Did they say the great Kiddush, but really meant the Kiddush that has not much to it, and they called it the great Kiddush, or that it was a great Kiddush? Additionally, it could be the great Kiddush, as Rashbam points out here, that the one bracha that is universal for all the times that we say a Kiddush is Borei Priagafen. It's there for every time we say something, we have we have a special bracha that we're going to say it over a cup of wine. So that's the most universal bracha. So the great Kiddush could also be reference to the most prolific, most common Kiddush. In any case, so they said to him, make Kiddush the great Kiddush for us. Now he wasn't sure what that meant. Are they going to repeat the Kiddush that you say at night? Is that the custom, local custom? So then he'll do it. But what he really wanted to know is maybe what his custom is to do the short Kiddush of just Borei Priagafen is sufficient. So what did he do? Havule, they gave him a cup of wine. Savar Maini Kiddush Rabbis. He was thinking, what do they mean by this great Kiddush? Amar Mechti. So he said, let's see. Kala brachas kula Borei Priagafen. All the Kiddushes, no matter how, you always start with the Borei Priagafen. So I'll say that bracha first, and then I'll wait and see, before I say something else, I'll see how the people react. And then I'll sort of, I'll linger at the end of the bracha for a few moments before I say anything else. While he did so, he saw one of the elders, the Gachin Vashasi, that he started leaning into his cup and take a sip. And even though the halacha is that when somebody's saying Kiddush, and then if that person gives out from the Kiddush cup to everyone else, you need to wait for the person who made the bracha to drink first. And then all of the people that got from the cup would drink. However, that's only true if the person is making Kiddush and then giving everybody from their cup. However, if everybody has their own cup, sort of like the Kesser custom, the way everybody has their own cup of Kiddush, what they're holding, and then somebody says Kiddush, and that covers everybody's Borei Priagafen, you can drink even before the person who made the bracha drink. And so this elderly person started leaning in to drink, and he realized, that's the end of Kiddush. And so he proclaimed on himself the verse, the wise person, his eyes are in his head. meaning he could see ahead, he can plan and think and figure stuff out based on a clear perception. Gemara tells further, Amri b'nei Rav Chia, Mishali hivdil b'motzei Shabbos, mavdil b'hilach kol Shabbos kuli. That these children of Rav Chia taught anybody that did not make Havdalah Friday night, Motzei Shabbos, as we saw yesterday, can continue making Havdalah throughout the week. The Gemara is going to tell us until Tuesday, at the end of Tuesday. Ad kama, and how far in can you do that? Amar Rabbi Zera ad Ravi Shabbos, up until Wednesday, up until the fourth day, which is Tuesday at night, at sunset. That's the end of Tuesday, and up until then you can make Havdalah. So somebody missed Havdalah Motzei Shabbos, you make Havdalah Sunday morning. They miss it Sunday morning, make it Sunday night. And they miss Sunday night, make it Monday morning, Monday night, Tuesday morning, Tuesday afternoon, up until halachic Wednesday. Kihad Yosef Rav Zera Kameda Ravasi, as we see that Rav Zera was sitting in front of Ravasi, Ravasi Kameda Rabbi Yochanan, or it was Ravasi sitting by Rabbi Yochanan. Yosef Kamar, and he said, Inyan Gitin Chada B'Shabsa, Treyet Lasa Basa Shabsa. Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday considered after Shabbos. So this is in regards to somebody who gives a divorce document and gives a get, conditionally says if you, whatever the condition may be, if you repay this loan by after Shabbos. After Shabbos means by the end of Tuesday. And if the person said, but however, Arba Chamisha Umali Yemesh Kamishabsa. But Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday are count as before Shabbos. So if the person said, if you pay it up before Shabbos, that means Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. If the person says after Shabbos would mean Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. And so too, Havdalah can be done Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, because they are still after Shabbos. So this is the halacha of Havdalah. Amar Rav Yaakov Aridi, Aval lo yala or. This that he says, that you can make Havdalah, even though that you're going beyond the Motzei Shabbos. That's only in regards to the statement of separation between holiness that has to be said. That mitzvah, which is the concept of ending Shabbos, to recognizing the sanctity of Shabbos not only at its onset, but also as it ends. That recognition of the kedusha of Shabbos is going to go not only Motzei Shabbos, but you can state that recognition even up until the end of Tuesday. Now, interestingly, Rambam seems to indicate that the Havdalah, the recognition, is the same Torah obligation of recognizing Shabbos at its onset, and then it would make it a Torah obligation. But it's unclear, as there seems to be proof from the Gemara before, that Havdalah would be a rabbinic obligation. But either way, there's the mitzvah for sure of Havdalah, and that would be fulfilled either till on Motzei Shabbos or until Tuesday. However, the new candle, the candle for Havdalah, the bracha on the light, that's only said Motzei Shabbos, which is the time that the renewal, the creation of new light. Amar Rav Bruna Amar Rav. So we have the teaching of Rav Bruna in the name of Rav. Hanoitel Yadav lo yikadish. Once somebody washed their hands, they should not make kiddush. And for this, we need a little bit of introduction, a couple of halachas. There's a halacha that says that takef lenatila, that immediately as you wash your hands, takef lenatila sedayim seuda, you should have the meal. This is a Gemara in Brachos, which is the idea that you should not take a break from washing your hands to eating. The washing the hands is sanctifying the hands for the bracha, for the bread, and that should be done immediately prior to the meal. And so if you washed your hands, you should not break with anything that's not necessary for the meal. And as we've seen before, Rav is of the opinion that kiddush does not require a meal. A meal does not require a kiddush. Kiddush is valid even shelo b'makom suda, even not when you're making the meal. And therefore, Rav says, you can't, if you wash your hands already, since kiddush is not a requirement of the meal, therefore the statement of kiddush is going to be a hefsek. It's going to be a break between the washing of the hands and the kiddush itself. And the meal itself, which is supposed to be immediate. And so the Rashbam says, so rather, what should one do according to Rav? They should wait, let someone else say the kiddush, because they've already washed their hands, so they have to have no break between the kiddush and the meal. Let someone else say the kiddush who has not washed their hands, and this way they're going to be able to just answer amen, which does not count as a break because you're saying amen on a bracha. They can even sip some of the wine from kiddush because that's a part of kiddush, but it doesn't constitute a break, and they're going to be able to join kiddush. So the halacha is anotel yadav. If somebody wash their hands, lo yikadesh, they should not make kiddush. Let someone else make kiddush and fulfill it for them, and they're going to be able to do it. And they'll be able to drink from it, and then they'll be able to have a motzi without a break between their hand washing and the motzi itself. This is according to Rav, where kiddush is not really a part of the meal. However, he shouldn't make kiddush and then wash again, because if he does that, he's making a superfluous, an extra bracha, which we've seen that you don't cause yourself to make a bracha that you don't need to do. So that's the opinion of Rav. If you wash, you should not make kiddush. Let somebody else say kiddush. If we have time, we'll come back to this and I'll explain the custom that you probably know is mine, that we make kiddush after we wash our hands before hamotzi. So, which is the classic Ashkenazi custom until just a few generations ago, as the Ramah in the Shulchan Aruch says that was the custom, that in all of Ashkenaz, in all of the European lands, the custom was to wash before Kiddush. Amar Luhu Rav Yitzchak bar Shmuel bar Marta. The Gemara continues that Rav Yitzchak, the son of Shmuel bar Marta, said, Akati le'noch nafshe de Rav shechachninu l'shmaite. Rav has not even passed away yet. I mean, Rav's alive, and we forgot his teachings. In other words, because we're saying in his name that if somebody made kiddush, wash his hands, it should not make kiddush. But I'm telling you, he's alive, and I can tell you that he himself had done this before. Why? Zimnin Sagiyin, many times, Havak Imna Kamed Rav, I would spend Shabbos in front of Rav. Zimnin the Chavivele Rifta Mekadesh Rifta, Zimnin the Chavivele Chamra Mekadesh Chamra. As the Rashbam explains, sometimes he was hungry, and so bread was the primary thing he wanted now, and so he would make the kiddush on bread. And the way he would do it is, instead of saying Bari Pri Agafen and then kiddush, he would say Hamotzi Lechem in Aretz and then kiddush, which means so the way the Rashbam explains this, that means if he was choosing whether to say kiddush on the cup of wine or kiddush on the bread, that means that he had already washed for the bread, would sit down at the table and say, okay, do I feel like I want bread or do I feel like I want wine? And since he had that choice, it means that he had already washed. And so we see that he would wash, and the making of kiddush, even though that he held kiddush is not needed for the meal, and the meal is not needed for kiddush. Well, kiddush is needed for the meal, but the meal is not needed for kiddush. Nevertheless, it's not going to be a break, and you're allowed to say the bracha of kiddush, and it's not. It doesn't constitute a problem because he's making kiddush, which is a mitzvah, and so it's not going to be a break between his hand washing and the meal because he's doing it at the meal. There's no hesach hadas. There's no mind change. He's intending to have the meal. There's nothing there that's hindering that. So we see that Rav himself would do this, and he would choose sometimes to make kiddush on bread and sometimes to make kiddush on wine. Now, this whole concept of making kiddush on bread is introduced here for the first time, and it's unclear as to when this is allowed and when this should be done. The idea of making kiddush on bread is a halachic dispute. Halachically, we say only somebody who doesn't have access to wine, to kiddush for drink, will make kiddush on bread, but generally kiddush on wine is preferable. Amar Rav Huna Amar Rav. Rav Huna said in the name of Rav, Ta'am Eina Mekadesh. Once you ate, if you ate prior to Kiddush, which you're not supposed to do, you're supposed to have Kiddush and then a meal. If you ate prior to having Kiddush, he says you've invalidated your opportunity to make Kiddush for that night. You have to wait until the morning and make Kiddush prior to eating, because a part of the statement of Kiddush is that you haven't sanctified Shabbos and glorified Shabbos with the celebration of Shabbos, and you're stating that it's Kaddish. But if you've already had the meal, you've negated that concept. So Ta'am Eina Mekadesh. Ba'aminei Rav Chana bar Chinana merav Huna. So Rav Chana bar Chinana asked Rav Huna, Ta'am ma'u sheyavdel. If you, based on this, if you ate before Havdalah, did you also ruin your opportunity to make Havdalah? You have to wait until Sunday morning to make Havdalah before eating? Amalei Agniya Omer, he said, I, Rav Huna, student of Rav, who follows this teaching of Rav, that if you made Kiddush, you can if you ate, you can no longer make Kiddush. Still, I say, Ta'am Mavdil. If you ate, you may make Havdalah. And the reason of the distinction is that the meal is Havdalah has nothing to do with the meal. Kiddush has something to do with the meal. Kiddush is a part of the sanctity of Shabbos and the glorification of Shabbos for its honor, which is the meal is a part of it. And even though Rav doesn't say that you need to have a meal immediately after Kiddush in the place of Kiddush, but nevertheless, Kiddush is a part of the Oneg Shabbos and the covered Shabbos, of which the meal is as well. But Havdalah has nothing to do with the meal, which is, by the way, the halacha that they say, the Rashbam and Tessa say, that even if you say that you can make Kiddush on bread, you cannot make Havdalah on bread, because Havdalah has nothing to do with a meal. And so to over here, if you ate, Rav says you can still make Havdalah. However, Rav Asi says if you ate prior to Havdalah, you, just like Kiddush, you lose your opportunity to make Havdalah, and you have to wait till the next morning. Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba Ikla be Rav Asi. So Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba, who was a student of Rav Huna, came and was visiting the house of Rav Asi. Ishtali v'tayim midi. And it was time for Havdalah, and he forgot, and he took a bite of something. And now, according to Rav Asi, his host, he's not allowed to make Havdalah till the morning. According to his Rebbe, Rav Huna, he's allowed to make Havdalah. Now, whether he knew that his host disagreed or not is not clear here. But either way, he went ahead and made Havdalah. Havule Kasa, they brought him a cup of wine. Va'avdil, and he said Havdalah. Amar le Davitu. So the wife of Rav Asi said to Rav Asi, I don't understand. You've taught us that you cannot make Havdalah once you ate. And you're his host. And he ate. And you brought him a cup of wine to make Havdalah. You don't follow that. Amalei Shavke. He says, yeah, leave him, let him do his thing. Karabe Svirale. He follows the opinion of his Rebbe, Rav Huna, who says that even if you ate, you can make Havdalah. And so therefore you let him do that. Amar Rav Yosef, Amar Shmuel, Ta'am Eina Mekadesh, Ta'am Eina Mavdil. So Rav Yosef said in the name of Shmuel, like Rav Asi, that if you ate, whether you ate before Kiddush, you can no longer make Kiddush, or if you ate before Havdalah, you can no longer make Havdalah. You have to wait till the next morning on an empty stomach. Before you eat, you have to make these brachas. However, Rabba Amar Nachman Amar Shmuel, even though that Rav Yosef said that in the name of Shmuel, the other students, Rabba said in the name of Rav Nachman, in the name of Shmuel, the contrary. That not only did he agree to Rav Huna that if you ate before Havdalah, you're allowed to still make Havdalah, but even if you ate before Kiddush, you can still eat and make it. You still make Kiddush. Amar Shmuel, Ta'am Mekadesh, Ta'am Mavdil. That regardless whether you made Havdalah or Kiddush or Havdalah, once you realize, you stop what you're doing and you make Kiddush, and then you continue your meal. You're allowed to make Kiddush that night. You did not lose the opportunity, and that is the halacha. Rava says that is indeed the halacha that if you made kiddush, if you ate before kiddush or you ate before havdalah, even though you were not supposed to have done that, you still made kiddush havdalah. You didn't lose the opportunity. And now we're on the top of Kuf Zayin Amud Aleph 107a. Umishale kiddush be'erev Shabbos, and also the halacha, the previous halacha. If somebody did not make kiddush Friday night, mekadosh be'erev kalayim kulei. On Mitzvah Shabbos, you can make kiddush the whole day. So somebody forgot kiddush Friday night, or they slept through it, or they were ill, whatever it is. And Shabbos morning, they realize, I didn't make kiddush. So you make kiddush now. The Friday night kiddush will be made Shabbos morning. And if they still didn't do it in the morning, they'll do it in the afternoon. Up until the end of Shabbos, you can make kiddush if you missed it at the beginning. Also, havdalah, mavdil, mishal hivdil, b'matzah Shabbos. Somebody who forgot or neglected to make havdalah matzah Shabbos, mavdil kol Shabbos kulei. You will go ahead and continue to say havdalah the entire Shabbos, meaning the entire week. Meaning, as we saw before in the Gemara, that it means whatever is considered after Shabbos, the rest of the week that's still attached to this previous Shabbos, which is Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. Wednesday is already the beginning of the next week, and it would not count as Havdalah from the previous Shabbos. But you can make Havdalah if you missed it. Not to Shabbos, you can make it Sunday, you missed Sunday, you can make it Monday. Monday, you missed Monday, you can make it Tuesday. So this is the halachas that we learned in the previous daf. Before we go on for tomorrow's daf, just go through this interesting halacha that we have at the beginning of Kuf Vav Amud Beis 106b at the top, where Rav said, "Hanotel yodav le'yikadosh." If you wash your hands, you should not make kiddush. Now, there's a couple of halachas, a couple of gemaras that are important. First of all, we have a machlokas between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. If you wash your hands or say the bracha of Hagafen first. Now, if that's talking about Shabbos, so then Rav is not telling us anything new. This is already machlokas Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. So Rabbeinu Tam in Tosfos says that that's talking about during the week, and that's a different discussion about they used to have cocktails prior to the meal, and the question was, would you? And in fact, as the Gemara indicates over there, by those cocktails, it was even on a different floor than where the meal was, or a different room than where the meal was. And that discussion of washing before drinking the wine is a separate halacha, because as the Rashbam points out here, that even though that there are opinions that you would wash your hands for fruit or for wine, just as you would wash your hands for bread, our custom is like the halacha that we only wash for bread. And the Gemara says that somebody follows the other opinion and washes for fruit or for wine, that's a haughtiness. And so that halacha is not relevant to us. That concept of, in general, washing hands for fruit or for wine, that's a separate halacha, and that machlokas Beis Shammai Beis Hillel. However, the concept seems to be interesting here, because we have the concept of not washing your hands for wine because it's migasi haruach. That's a haughtiness. You're following the other opinion. And if you make kiddush, like my custom, like the Ashkenazi custom originally, that of washing prior to kiddush, it seems like you're washing your hands before you're washing your hands for the wine. So that's issue number one. Also, we said that there is a break between the kiddush, between the hand washing and the eating of the bread, which is going to be a halachic breach of the concept, takef l'netilas yadayim su'uda, that you have to have immediately following the hand washing, you should have your meal. The Shulchan Aruch, in codifying the halacha of the order of kiddush, says you wash your hands after you make kiddush. And the Shulchan Aruch says, because if you wash prior to making kiddush, now you're in this concept of Rav, where Rav said that sometimes he would wash his hand and make kiddush on bread. And you wash your hands, you indicate that you want to make kiddush on the bread. So you can't make kiddush on the wine anymore. That's the opinion of the Shulchan Aruch. And so therefore, the Shulchan Aruch says you wash after Kiddush. However, Rama Moshe Israels, who is the Ashkenazic notes on the Shulchan Aruch for the Ashkenazi custom, writes that the prevalent custom in all these lands, meaning in the Ashkenazic lands, is to wash and then make Kiddush. And the explanation for that is, since we don't follow the opinion of Rav, we follow the opinion of Shmuel that says that Kiddush is b'makam suda, that in order to make Kiddush, you have to do it at the place of the meal. As we saw multiple times at the beginning of this parak of this chapter last week, that the obligation of Kiddush is connected to the meal. That wherever v'karasa l'Shabbos onik, wherever you have the call for a Shabbos, meaning wherever you're stating Kiddush, there shall be the onik. That's where you should have the pleasure, which is the honor of Shabbos through a delightful meal. So Kiddush is an intrinsic part, an integral part of the meal. And therefore, as the Chassam Sofer explains, there is no breach, there is no break between your hand washing and the meal, because the Kiddush is a part of the meal. In fact, Moshe Feinstein writes in the Tshuva, in fact, washing after Kiddush would be considered a break between the Kiddush and the meal, which is the halacha that you have to have Kiddush at your meal. So Rav Moshe Feinstein writes in a Tshuva that you're not supposed to talk from when you make Kiddush. Even if you wash after Kiddush, don't talk. You make Kiddush and you're silent. You just go and wash and come back and do hamotzi. Between the moment that you make Kiddush until the moment that you eat shouldn't be any speaking, because Kiddush is an integral part of the meal and must be part of the meal. However, the original Ashkenaz custom, which is my custom as well, is to wash before Kiddush. And the idea is that by indicating that you're having the meal, you've already washed, now the Kiddush is an integral part of the meal, and it really is a part of the meal. Now, we have the problems that the Rashbam and the Gemara brought up. Problem number one is that it looks like you're washing for the wine, and if you're washing for the wine, that is a haughtiness. So the response to that the Ramah would say, and that the Ashkenazi custom is that no, I'm not washing for the wine, I'm washing for the meal. The Kiddush is the wine, and the washing is for the bread. The break, also, as we mentioned, that's not a break, because anything you need for the meal is not a break between the hand washing and the bread. And so this is a part, the integral part. The Kiddush is an integral part. What we didn't address was the question of the Shulchan Aruch, that if you washed, you indicated you wanted the bread, so you're supposed to make Kiddush on the bread. Now, as we mentioned, this whole concept of making Kiddush on bread is not clear at all. Rabbeinu Tam, the Rashbam's younger brother, quoted here in Tosfos, one of the most prominent of the Tosfos, of the authors of Tosfos, the heads of the Academy of the Tosfos, the Tosfosists academies, the students and grandchildren of Rashi. So Rabbeinu Tam says that you can't just make Kiddush on bread. That's not really an option. It's a lengthy Tosfos as to what is going on in the Gemara here and when you could or can't use it, and if this is universal. But the idea is that making Kiddush on bread is, as we mentioned, the halacha is that's not the optimum way of doing it, and only if you don't have access to wine should you make Kiddush on bread. So therefore, the Ashkenazi custom, which would come from the students of Rabbeinu Tam, based on that said, no, even if you washed and you indicated you want to eat bread, still, if you have access to wine, you would be making Kiddush on wine. And so there's no indication whatsoever that you're making Kiddush on bread. And so you're allowed to make the Kiddush on wine, even though you've already washed it, which was the Ashkenazi custom. However, there's a compromise custom, which is mentioned in the poskim, as halacha, for people that are going to follow both opinions here. If you're concerned that once you wash, you've indicated you want to make Kiddush on bread, so therefore Shulchan Aruch says not to wash. However, if you didn't wash, so then you don't have the kiddush at the meal because you haven't started your meal yet. You're going to wash after kiddush, and that's problematic according to the opinion that that the meal has to be connected to the kiddush. So to make a compromise, the idea is this: that the person who is actually making the kiddush will not wash. So they haven't indicated they're eating bread yet. However, everyone else that's going to be at the table will go ahead and wash before kiddush. And by doing so, they have indicated that they're about to sit down to a meal. And so everybody's sitting for a meal. So we now have kiddush at the place of a meal because everybody is already washed, everybody that is besides for the person making kiddush. So we're at a meal, and the kiddush is then attached to the meal itself. However, the person making the kiddush has not indicated that they're eating bread yet because they haven't gone to wash. So they make kiddush before washing. However, everybody in attendance makes kiddush after having washed. This way, kiddush is at the place of the meal, and then the person making kiddush will go wash, and that doesn't count as a breach between kiddush and the meal because everybody's sitting at the table waiting for the meal. In any case, there are various customs. Some people have the custom, the original Ashkenazi custom, that everybody washes before kiddush. I believe that was the Rabbi Oppenheimer's custom. And then there are those that have the more widespread custom today of everybody washing after kiddush, which has been widespread for the last 3-4 generations. And the compromise custom where everybody washes before kiddush and the person making kiddush washes after kiddush. Either way, whatever one's custom is, what is clear in the halacha, because kiddush has to be at the place of a meal, and there should not be a break between kiddush and the meal, that it is appropriate to immediately after kiddush, not linger and chat, but rather immediately after kiddush to go ahead and wash for the meal if it's Friday night, and Shabbos day, if you're having a kiddush on some snacks like you would have at Kesser, you have to have mizonos, you have to have some wheat for of the 5 grains. You have to have a mizonos for the meal, or you're going to wash and have a proper meal. You should do so as soon as possible, as quickly as possible, without chatting, without, according to Moshe Feinstein, not speaking at all. But even if you're going to talk, but to immediately be heading to wash so that the kiddush is at the place of the meal without a break. Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach will end with this. One of the great poskim in Israel of the previous generation held that when you're in a large crowd where there's a lot of people, and so if you wait after kiddush to wash, there will be lines, and it'll take 5-10 minutes to wash, that it is better to wash before kiddush according to all opinions, because then otherwise you're making a break between kiddush and the meal. And kiddush, as we said, the primary function of kiddush is to be at the meal, and if you take too big of a break, you may actually have to make kiddush again. In any case, that's the conclusion of this Gemara, and we'll see each other tomorrow morning, Be'ezus Hashem.